All right, take a seat. Join me. All right, so we are going to start the discussion, the Q&A portion of the panel. So I want to, we've got our speakers on the screen. Hello and welcome. All right. And if you have questions from the audience, please step up to the microphones and speak loud and proud, and we will start the discussion. Yes, to my left.
Hi there, I'm Jackie Wernemont. Thank you so much for the panel. It's super my jam. I wonder if any of the three of you could comment on how we think about how we care for the people who are encountering our data, which is to say, right, I'm very much on board with the sense, right, that like we should play and interact with our data, and that embodied knowing is a very powerful way of knowing. At the same time, I work on really traumatic data, right, and we've seen some of that discussed today. And so I'm often trying to think about how do I take something that is physical and visceral or sonic or manifest in the other senses and responsibly share it with other humans who might feel harm when dealing with difficult data. So I would ask for your thoughts on that.
All right, if one of our speakers, if you're on the screen, just tap in or unmute and you can answer. Otherwise, Tatiana, if you have some thoughts, we can start with you.
Okay, it is on. Yeah, I think that sensitivity is so important to be aware of. And I feel like if there's a way that we can all bring like a base understanding without necessarily bringing the trauma firsthand to the forefront, even though that trauma or that the traumatic aspects of the data is emotionally impactful, if we can get kind of like on a baseline page across different groups of people who might be impacted on this, I feel like that could be a nice step one.
So maybe I can add a little. You guys can hear me properly? Okay. Yeah. So it's not just about the data. Like it's also about any type of stories that you are seeing or any movies that you see. There is some kind of a trigger warning that, hey, this is what's going to happen. And for the audience, they may be prepared for that. So I didn't do a good job today when I shared some of those visuals, but I think maybe some of those things could be added when we are sharing those kind of data, those kind of stories. And it's not just data visualization, it could be anything.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I think, well, first and foremost, like anonymity is a must. Again, as both speakers have already said, it's not really about the personal experience associated with a certain person, but like what the data is actually saying. In her work, in one of the precedents that I showed, Jamie Snyder's work was with people with bipolar disorder, and everyone's personal data was anonymous, but through those drawings and through those vernacular expressions of what the data means, I think that was a really powerful and comprehensive message that those researchers were trying to show. So yeah, it's about remaining anonymous, but it's about making those visuals and the expressions really speak for themselves.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience.
Hi, I have a question, Tatiana. When you pulled up the spreadsheet with lots of information, that resonated with me. I'm coming from the philanthropic sector where we always collect a lot of data and it can feel overwhelming at times. So what would you recommend be the starting points to make it digestible from a data engineering perspective?
Yeah, I can't even explain how often I feel that way. Even as someone who has like been to school in an official capacity for this, I think it's always my biggest barrier. And I think what I would suggest is kind of doing what I did there, which my project really didn't get going until I was able to make sense of the data. And for my project, that was by going to site. So I went out there with a clipboard with this printed Excel spreadsheet, and I went around and tried to find all the buildings that were these intangible pieces of data to me. But I think that for me, starting with pen and paper, starting with some sort of checklist, trying to really understand what one row of data means is really the first starting point in my process.
Thank you. Do we have a question from the virtual audience?
We do. So what are the biggest drawbacks of data physicalization, e.g. site-specific, hard to share, hard to build, and how might we address those constraints?
Maybe I can take that. Yeah, so one of the challenges that I see for data physicalization is when I think of me doing those stuff and my kids sitting around, they would say, "Hey, Dad is having fun. Like he's not doing his work, but he's just playing around with the Legos and trying to do something with a physical thing." And there comes the distraction piece. When I think of doing that at my office, again, this is kind of a novel thing. If I'm just with a screen doing some digital visualization, then like people think, okay, this is a serious work, but it takes a while. Like it's not something people are used to. So this is like bring that in, bring that again and again, and that's what can help remove the constraints. So that's what comes to my mind right now. Other speakers, maybe you want to add other stuff.
Yeah, sure. Like speaking to playful data viz, especially, people tend not to take it seriously, as Gulrez has pointed out. And yeah, that validity of quantitative versus qualitative data, interpretation is always a problem. But I think it is that's also the answer to that. It's about data physicalization. Well, in my work anyway, it is about showing those human aspects, and I think that's kind of what audiences need to understand, that yes, it is about quantity, about numbers, but it's also the stories behind it. It's about the emotion behind it, and the human understandings behind it. So I think that needs to be prefaced, and there needs to be a shift in the audience's understanding of what data is and what data could be.
Can I answer too? For me and my work, I will be very transparent that piece was very expensive. And part of me really hopes that this presentation and the conversations we have here are meaningful enough that people, companies, organizations will actually start to fund more still playful but potentially more expensive data physicalization projects, because I see that the value is so large and so great in terms of engagement. But yes, that is one of the largest barriers in data physicalization for sure.
Thank you. All right, question from the audience.
Related to Legos, I think maybe this is me paying attention to what Lego is releasing every month, but I think they're maybe also trying to venture into the data physicalization sphere. I remember there's like this building a Lego for what the universe looks like, and then this like tiny white dot corresponds to like Earth in the galaxy. If anyone here is familiar with that. There's also like trying to build like, Van Gogh pieces, which you could argue is, data being visualized into a form and now being turned into like bricks and Lego. So I was wondering, is there any, business potential to pitch an idea for building like some framework using Lego bricks that would allow you to physicalize stuff? And related to that, if that is like maybe some potential business idea, what would be, how would you argue about like accessibility, right? Because similar to the argument that not everyone here in the room may have access to technology. Like, what if no one can have access to the more high-end gears for data physicalization? Sorry, that was a long question.
That's okay. That's okay. Do any of our Reg or Gulrez, do you?
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I like long questions. I think like things like Lego, like anything modular, like really kind of lends itself to data sets. And well, this is kind of like also one of the aims of my research is to use non-high-end things. So things that are really easily accessible, things that are, can be easily sourced and cheaply sourced. So this is kind of where the vernacular part of it comes into play. Things don't need to be expensive, and things can be accessible in order for it to be transformed into a database. So it's, I think, a matter of just being a bit resourceful and using a lot of creativity and yeah, just using your imagination a bit to make materials work in a way that's unexpected and again playful. So I don't think it needs to be expensive. And yeah, I don't think like sourcing cheap materials is yeah, it's too much of an issue if you kind of have the right perspective or the right frame of mind.
Yeah, so the unexpected is the key word, right? So which Reg mentioned. That is one thing that would surprise people. Right now, like I've got a bunch of my mails in my mailboxes. I get lots of these mails, and out of, let's say I get 10 mails, I would see one mail which is handwritten, and I have this a handwritten mail, right? So I have not opened all those 9 mails, but since this is a handwritten mail, I wanted to open that. I thought like this is something different, and though like this is old school thing, but it makes you kind of think and see, okay, there is a human right now with all these tool aspect. It becomes more and more digital, and with all this AI stuff coming in, things will be more on that side, and there would be a craving for the audience to see the human aspect. Like that's where like you see like the stuff with pen and paper, you find it more useful. And what Regine also mentioned about being resourceful, you don't have to use something maybe like very expensive. Just maybe start with pen and paper. Like in my book, I talk about teaching data visualization to kids without using any digital things. Like all that stuff is with pen and paper. I was trying to teach them about the flowers of like some flowers which are found in different parts of the United States, and we just put one flower in each place where it is found, and it is kind of a physical visualization. So things like that could be experimented with.
Anna, do you want to take
Yeah, no, I will jump in very quickly. But I feel like the accessibility part of materials is actually there's a reasonable solution to it, especially in the background of architecture that I'm from. Found materials were always what we were encouraged to start with. So we did our very first architecture projects based off of things we found. So I picked up umbrellas out of the trash to make something out of them. And I think there is a sustainability aspect to working with found materials for data viz as well.
Great. Yeah, we have time for one last question. For the person to my right, go ahead.
Hi, yes, so with some of these materials being more on the expensive side, what are some of the evaluation measures that you are using to really evaluate the outcomes and the impact of your work to keep this kind of sustainable and being able to continue using data physicalization?
Reg, do you want to start us off?
Sorry, the expense bit, I couldn't really hear the question very well.
Can you go back real quick?
Sorry.
I guess just in terms of, let's say you're using this to show something to your stakeholders or something to your audience, and you want to have some type of impact on them. How do you evaluate the impact that you do have? What are some of those outcome measures that you're looking for? Just because, using technology might be a little bit easier than going out and finding materials that could be more expensive.
All right, and we have a couple of minutes left, so we're going to do like lightning round responses on this one. So Reg, give me your one example.
Sorry, it's not going to be a lightning answer. It was, for me, it was about really choosing materials that were easily accessible and cheap, and then communicating that to the audience, that everything was recyclable and everything was sustainably sourced.
Gulrez, lightning response.
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do you measure the impact? And as I said earlier in my talk, the purpose is to move the audience from point A to point B. If you're passing on any recommendations and see like if the ask is taken by, like that means there is some success. So that's what comes to my mind right now.
And Tatiana.
Yeah, that's actually something I've been grappling with. For me, I am trying to have this exhibit piece travel. So it will be going down to the University of Virginia this fall. And for me, measuring impact, I'm really trying to use the collective reflection cards as a way to kind of gauge people's understanding, but also do an analysis on them to see how that impact from interacting with the piece may change depending on location.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists this afternoon. We had some really great talks. I know we had a lot of questions. I had a few I didn't even get to ask. So I invite you to connect with the speakers either in person here or on Slack to continue these conversations and ask additional questions there. Thank you all very much. All right.